Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Wednesday, December 11th. This winter's getting into the winter here. Dark times, getting to the closest, shortest day of the year, which is December 21st, the winter solstice, whatever it's called. And so my view count's down a little bit. I want to get into this stuff with the CEO killer, Luigi. We'll get into the Luigi stuff here in a moment. They're still really rolling this thing out like I said they would. You know, not because I said it, because it's just what they do. The information packets that come out through the news media over a period of time, right? And so, just to start off with, though, my view count's down. It's gone down from 5,000 to 4,000, and just a fall off. I don't know if it's post-election things. I don't know whether it's because I'm putting out more content, almost daily content, or it's that people aren't getting notified again. And so if you're not getting notified, the way to do it is to keep the browser, if you have a browser, keep this channel open because there's new content coming out almost on a daily basis. But it's 1/5, right? It's 20%. And so, I feel like my videos should get 20,000, 50,000 views a day. I think that would be the optimal amount. I don't know. There's a time where I was getting that, but it was maybe not per day, but I was getting hundreds of thousands, millions of views on some videos. Of course, the content wasn't. It was worse than it is in terms of it was more dumbed down. But either way, I'm going in the wrong direction. The channel's going in the wrong direction. I'll eventually go and confront the bots again about getting shadow banned, because that seemed to have positive effect when I get time to do that, probably in January. And just so people know, like all the things, check the box, like the video, leave a comment, even if it's emoji, any number of things you can do to show that you are interested in receiving more of this kind of content, that YouTube's algorithms see that you're enjoying it, even if you don't watch the whole video, letting YouTube know that you want to be notified when these videos come up, and just know that the channel's relevant, seeing that the more people that are watching it have a positive reaction to it. I mean, there's already shadow banning that goes on for any kind of a truther channel, and so all of those things. So I wanted to cover this this part. I covered this in my last video, but sometimes you hear something and you think about it later on, going, "Wow, that's effed up," right? Like you think you have more thoughts about something. And this particular part of the video that I covered yesterday on Tuesday.
He talks about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and essentially says that he's a political revolutionary, and this is all being scrubbed right now as we speak, his social media accounts, as, again, investigators are still trying to figure out a motive.
Okay, so when these people, when these, whenever there's one of these shooters, somebody's accused of one of these things, and there's various, examples of this, their social media is scrubbed. And if it's being done by the person themselves or the team of lawyers or whatever, that's one thing. Like, who's doing the scrubbing? Because that's important. And it isn't him because, so first of all, he's arrested. So if he had social media up when he was arrested, he has no access to his social media. He can't go in from jail. He's in handcuffs and he's behind bars and he has no access to any devices. And so it would have to be somebody in his life that would have his passwords. And so he'd have to go to a lawyer, and they would have to give him all of his passwords, and they would have to scrub it. So if it isn't him, then it would have to be either YouTube or Facebook or the organization itself that would be told by the government to scrub the person's social media. And he's not convicted of anything, right? Like if he was a convicted killer and there was stuff that was, disturbing or whatever it might be. But, the stuff that's there's no reason for it legally or any other reason for them to, just because he's accused of something, doesn't mean that Facebook gets to purge out his stuff. I mean, they can legally, like they can just, we know that all the stuff that social media can do to you because it's a private company. He hasn't violated any community guidelines, right? There's nothing that he's done to justify scrubbing his social media because he's just accused of something. Like he's already been tried by CNN and MSNBC and Fox or whatever, these mainstream media. He's already been convicted. Like he's already been demonized. Everybody says he's guilty. This guy, it's overwhelming, the evidence, to organizations that most of us don't trust. Media and the law enforcement and these other things. We don't trust them to do the right thing. And we don't even know if this guy's, is he a real person? Is this some person they just made up? We're going to get into his family here. So it seems like he's a real person. But these people who are talking about him, right, is these are, any of these things can be created now, in terms of, it's just like a TV show. They can manufacture any kind of news like a TV show. And, I want to get into this more as we go through this about why it's better to control every aspect of something. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. I don't want to talk about it here, but I want to go to this other stuff that I have to show you. But when you're scrubbing somebody's social media, this woman just said something big, that this guy had social media out there, like most young people do. And he was on either Instagram, they had their, whatever his thing of choice was, and he was putting out content. And usually someone who writes a manifesto, if someone has opinions, right, strong opinions, they're verbalizing those opinions on social media. And so to scrub those opinions, right, why would you do that? If he's convicted, sure. But the stuff that's on social media could present him in a different way. And people are fascinated by this stuff. And so for all that stuff to disappear, that means that either he's doing it, which is, now he's got a lawyer, and maybe they could be doing that for whatever reason. But I think it's not him. And that means that this is some kind of bullshit thing that's going on, right? Because this isn't real. If they're able to just go and say, all right, this guy's accused, and he has his right to due process, and you're going to scrub his social media, like that's completely effed up, right? It's just effed up in lots of different ways, because this is how people communicate their point of view and their side of the story. And you have the government and the media communicating one side of the story, and you have nothing on his end because he's in jail and he can't verbalize his whatever his position is, right? So anyways, I have a bunch of news stories to get to here, and they're going to be redundant to some extent. Like there's things we've already heard and things we're going to hear again and again today. And I want to show you that because it shows you that they're given these talking points, and they're not doing individual journalistic, investigation, because any good journalist should assume the government's going to lie. When you have a system of checks and balances, journalism is a check and a balance. Governments just won't make shit up or create something or do psychological operations. But the CIA has so infiltrated mainstream media that, or the intelligence community, that they don't ever question these things, right? So whatever they're told, they report like it's fact. Like these things are believable in fact. When the most of Americans don't believe in the three-letter agencies, they don't believe in the media, they don't believe in the government, they don't believe in law enforcement, right? Not that they disbelieve it, they just don't think it's like a slam dunk, right? Like, it's not necessarily true. And so, and those of us who are truthers, we believe that these things are constructive narratives that have an agenda. And you can see the agenda, whether it's real or fake, there's always an agenda, right? Or how much of it's faked or how much of it's contrived. At some point, the agenda takes over, and it's an agenda-driven story where everything that they're telling you is to support their agenda, right? Whatever information you're getting is out there to support your agenda.
Chilling words tonight from what a law enforcement source says were
their agenda.
Pages of notes in a spiral-bound notebook made by murder suspect Luigi Mangione, who's now awaiting extradition from Pennsylvania in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. In one passage, again, according to our source who was briefed on the matter.
Okay, so unnamed source. My name source says there's a spiral notebook where he's saying these things. And again, I think this guy's part of it, Luigi. Whatever the thing is. There's a, whatever this is, like some kind of conspiracy or whatever you want to call it. But, this wouldn't be fair. Like he has an unnamed source and they're just leaking all this information. This kid has to go to trial at some point. And this evidence hasn't been vetted in a court type situation. in front of a judge. And, of course, the judge is going to be corrupt, all this stuff, right? But, like, if this was a real thing, not some TV show, then there's protocol. And they're already convicting this guy. I mean, they did it yesterday, and now even more so last night. This is from last night.
Tony muses about what could be better than to, quote, kill the CEO at his own bean counting conference. Now, earlier.
So they're pulling quotes out of this notebook and leaking them to the media. Why do that, right? The guy is going to have a trial, and they can pull all the evidence in and show it in front of a judge and see if it's valid, and all these things. His defense team can react and say it's from him or whatever it is, and that him saying that right here, looks bad, but doesn't mean he did it. Like, you could say something like that. Lots of young people say shit like that on social media. They, people talk about doing things they would never do, right? And so, again, it doesn't mean he's guilty. And of course, like, this is whatever contrived element to this thing there is. There's that, but this is what I was saying earlier. And so, whenever one of these events, I believe everybody should. The best case scenario for them is that everybody is controlled. That everyone should be controlled if you're going to do something like this, because if you take somebody, and an innocent person, and the person's not cooperating with you. He's not he's not playing a character, or playing a role here. Then you never know what he's going to do. You never know what his defense team's going to do, and they become uncontrolled variables, right? And so if there's real victimization, and somebody is actually killed, well, then you have the family of that person, and they might not go along with your bullshit, right? It's like what happened with Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman was a volunteer, as far as I can tell. He quit his football career and went to fight in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he went and joined the military with his brother. And he was murdered. He was friendly fire, allegedly. And his family never bought the story. And he was starting to read this guy, Noam Chomsky, who, for truthers we don't think much of, but he was starting to question the official story. And he was somebody who did that anyway. He was homeschooled, and his family was like this, right? And so then military created a hero, like a recruiting instrument, and his family wasn't about it. And there was multiple documentaries where his family went after in court hearings where they confronted the military and the way this was handled. Now, it didn't amount to much, like none of these things do, but it wasn't good for their official story. It made headaches for them because they were the grieving family, and they can't demonize the grieving family and shut the door on the grieving family like they did, mistreat the grieving family. It just looks bad. And then everyone who sees that is going to question the official story. And so they have to have everybody, all hands on deck, right? And so to do that, they really can't have victims, because this is about victimization, all these things, right? Of course, they're going to talk about this, and I have another clip where they're acknowledging that the majority of people, it seems like, are not bummed out about a CEO getting killed, and they're kind of on this kid's side, which is maybe something they didn't count on, right? But there's all these, when you control things, you have to control all of them. And when you're creating lies, you have to control all of it, because the truth is trying to get out. The truth is always there. Like, the divine forces are always trying to bring darkness, light into the darkness. And so when you are creating these psychological operations and you're doing these lies, the truth, especially this time, what's happening before the big collapse is coming, the truth is just, they can't, it's like the hole in the dike, and there's too many holes in the dikes, and the water's starting to gush through, and before you know it, the whole dam comes down. And that the truth, because of the internet and just the time we live in, because it's a time of truth, it's a time that the lies just don't, they don't land like they used to. And these guys can't keep the truth from spilling out. So them controlling every aspect, including the shooter, including the victim and the victim's family, and all these things, the shooter's family, they have to control all these people, because if any of them don't agree with the official story and they go rogue, it creates big headaches for them, because they're already fighting the tide of truth that's coming in, right? And so let's go back to it.
Today, his attorney was asked about Mangione's state of mind at the moment.
I wasn't looking for impressions. What I was trying to do form a bond.
Geez, like, is there any more? Is this Tom Dick? Is his name Tom Dick? It's more than Dick. What is it? Tom Dickey. Thomas Dickey. They got a guy named Thomas Dickey to represent Luigi, and maybe Mario when they finally get Mario. Like, come on, Thomas Dickey. He looks just like a Weasley, like a mob attorney, right?
With my client, I want him to trust me, and I want him to be confident that I'm here for him. And I feel that I'm very pleased how that went.
As we mentioned before the break, some of
Like, just not smooth.
his friends describe him dropping off the radar recently. We still don't know much about that. We know more, though, about what came before, and our Gary Tuckman has that.
Gary Tuckman. Look at this guy. Look at this guy getting it done.
The high school valedictorian, Luigi Mangione, graduating from Baltimore's Gilman School in 2016, an exclusive private school.
The parents here today.
So they're really pushing this part of the narrative, right? That this person was gifted, was head above the. It was the top of a class of elite level, wealthy people who are sending their kids to these private schools that are all, coming from successful families and pushing for academic excellence, right? And that this guy's cream of the crop.
First off, sending us to Gilman was far from a small financial investment.
Indeed, tuition at the private school was and still is pricey, at almost $38,000 a year today.
$40,000 a year to go to high school. So it cost his family $160,000, close to $160,000, $150,000 over 4 years or whatever time he went there. I don't know how many years he went there. But think about that. That's a college. 1 year is like a lot of college tuitions cost $40,000, like, state schools or things like this, where you could get, or the online schools. I mean, you could get a college degree for that $40,000, like not private schools or Ivy League schools. And then you went to Ivy League school on top of it. And so think about that, right? And they're paying that money, so these guys are coming out and going to college and set up for success, right? These kids are pipelined to be successful. They're meeting the right people. They're getting the right kind of academic help, and they are set up for success in college, and then they're set up for success in life, right?
But murder suspect Mangione had a family with plenty of money.
And I was just stunned, shocked, couldn't believe it. Not who you would think of at all.
Thomas Moronic Jr. is an attorney who knows the family.
Mangione family is one of the prominent families of Baltimore County. They own a lot of real estate. They own golf courses. They're just a very well-respected name.
In this family picture, Luigi Mangione stands third from the left. He is surrounded by his sisters. His father, Louis, and mother Kathleen are on the right.
So, there's different ethnicities have a different, have attitudes towards family, right? Where you come from in the country makes a difference, your political leanings, but also your ethnicity. And there's Italians have almost enmeshment with their family, right? Often wanting the kids to go in business, do the family business. Have you seen these things, right? Like each culture has their own approach to family. That's why when you have different ethnicities marrying, they have different trainings and different understanding of marriage. I saw this quite, I won't say flagrantly, but in terms of the Sajmark system, there was marriages from people from different ethnic backgrounds, different countries, and they almost always failed, especially when people married an Indian person, because the Indians' approach to marriage, of course, arranged marriage is completely different, and the family environment is different than most other cultures, certainly European and American cultures, right? But European people who married each other, who came from different countries, it's hard to, not having the same upbringing and having the same, like my wife and I talk about, because we're, with similar ages, right? My wife's a couple years younger than me, but we grew up in the same time period, and we have the same memories. We watched the same shows when we were a kid, and we lived through the same kind of things. And that's why when there's an age gap and there's a generation gap between two people, or an ethnic gap or a country gap because you grew up in a different country, or racial, things that are different experiences. Some of those things are hard to, you have to work those things out, right? Where if you have a lot more in common with a person, then, same kind of, like, we both enjoyed going to the ocean when we were kids and exploring, and we both, like, searching for animals and these kinds of things, right? And when you have similar experiences like that, it's a lot easier to have a relationship because there's mutual understanding. But your family, there's always going to be differences, right? Your family's way of interpreting conflict, like how you deal with conflict. And your family's going to deal with it differently than other families, right? But in terms of like what we know about Italian families, and I'm part Sicilian, and I have a lot of Italian relatives, they're one of the cultures that have a lot of enmeshment. And like, he seems to be happy. I mean, it's a Christmas photo. But I don't think this was, like he was some kid who was going rogue, right? It doesn't make sense that a kid who was valedictorian and all these things would do this stuff. Like, that's what they're trying to say to you, that this kid totally did it, but nobody saw it coming. Like, that's one of their narratives, that it's the serial killer that everybody liked, but he's got heads of people in his freezer, but everyone thought, well, what a nice guy. Never thought he would do that. It's a narrative they keep on saying, that it's somebody they can pluck off the streets and say, this guy everybody liked, he was a good person, he was successful, showed no signs of this, but one day he just did it, right? So that means that everybody's a suspect. It's not just people with bad attitudes and criminal records, that everybody's a suspect. It's something the narrative they're always pushing.
Mother Kathleen are on the right. In the late 70s, the murder suspect's late grandfather, World War II veteran Nicholas Mangione Sr., and his late grandmother, Mary, started creating a business empire. The grandfather grew up in Baltimore's Little Italy neighborhood. He ended up buying 2 country clubs, started a nursing home company, and bought WCBM Radio, a well-known conservative talk station in Baltimore. Family members also run a family foundation that has nearly $4.5 million in assets, and were longtime benefactors of Loyola University, Maryland. The suspect's father today runs the family business. Attorney Moronic used to be a talk show host at the radio station owned by the family.
Well, they donated money for the pools, the swimming center at Loyola University. It bears their name. That's a huge amount of donating to get that.
One of Luigi Mangione.
Millions of dollars. They have millions of dollars. This is all those assets. They were talking about probably hundreds of millions, at least tens of millions of dollars, like 50, 60, 70, 80, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Money that they'll never spend. And a family business that, they have a smart kid and, maybe they want him to run it, right? Like he was going to inherit the family business. They have one son, depending what his daughters are going to do. The daughters are, if they're going to get married and be, housewives, and they're maybe not interested in running the family business, or they could all be part of it, right? This whole idea of succession. But there's be some push for, this is like a corporation, right? The family owns all these various assets, and there's this like CEO that has to run all these assets, right? And so, maybe private jets and things like this and all the rest of these things. And so none of these things make sense with the story, the rest of the story that we hear about this guy.
Mangione's cousins is a state legislator in Maryland.
I am Delegate Nino Mangione, for the record, District 42A in Baltimore County.
Republican Delegate Nino Mangione introduced a bill earlier this year to bring back the death penalty in Maryland.
I believe we need to send a strong signal to the most vicious of all criminals that if you take a life, that justice in turn will demand your life.
The bill failed. Notably, New York State, where United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was killed.
Okay, so, this thing I have to edit out here. I'm going to stop it here. And so I can remember to edit out because they, YouTube is lightened up on this. Is the other thing. YouTube, there was one of the things for demonetization of a video was disturbing content. Was content that would disturb you if you saw it. And CNN could show it, but YouTube would monetize it and allow you to make money off of it. So what they were doing is making it so that you couldn't cover events that would be considered disturbing, which is completely fucked up, right? It makes it so that you're only getting news from their what they call authoritarian sources, right? But they seem to be loosening up on all these things because it was the Biden administration and the Democrats that were pushing for censorship, and now that seems to have gone, at least in terms of this period of time, the election cycle, and then we'll see what happens in January. because it's in January they start tightening up on these things, either in terms of demonetization of videos and or stuff to do with community guidelines. And we'll see, because, you know, even though things have changed and people understand things differently and there's pushback to all this stuff, there is some pressure still there to not allow people to discuss what we're seeing, right? That is contrary to the official story.
Also does not have the death penalty. State Delegate Mangione released a statement on behalf of the family that says in part, "Our family is shocked and devastated by Luigi's arrest. We offer our prayers to the family of Brian Thompson, and we ask people to pray for all involved. We are devastated by the news." Luigi Mangione received an Ivy League education, graduating with a bachelor's and then master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania. That, coupled with his family wealth, afforded him advantages most don't have. To conclude his high school valedictorian speech, he said this.
It's been an incredible journey, and I simply can't imagine the last few years with any other group of guys.
A young man of promise then, an alleged killer now, whose journey into darkness has only just begun. Gary Tucker.
Journey into darkness only has just begun. You see when it said things there. You know, they're saying he's convicted, right? The same thing with Syria. I want to get into some stuff with Syria. Hopefully, maybe this video, we'll see how much time we have. But, you know, they talk about Assad and Syria like it was evil, and there's nothing, it was a good thing that happened. But now they have thugs and gangs and, you know, the unrest and the vacuum that's created when you take down a government, right? And something that they want to do to get to, you know, now Russia and Iran have been weakened, and they want to get to Iran, and taking down Syria is going to be helpful for that, right? Especially if they're able to get access to the Iranian border with Syria.
In CNN, New York.
Some perspective now. Joining us is forensic psychologist Cr1me and CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kayyem. Juliette, I'm listening to Gary expand on his background. How does that, or how might it fit into the puzzle that investigators are trying to piece together right now? I mean, is this the usual profile for a shooter in this kind of crime?
The profiles differ, but the idea that he had a great education and came from privilege, we've had killers like this before, in particular.
Killers like this, right? You know, there's lots of people who have money and wealth that do legal killing, whether they work for pharmaceutical companies, they become doctors, right? They become, you know, people who work for the CIA or governmental people who, like Joe Biden, who ordered the droning of people that ended up murdering 8 children, you know, and the media didn't cover that because, you know, they basically covered it in a way that they didn't make a big deal about it, right? But he decided to drone people, made up that bullshit ISIS-K thing. You guys remember that stuff, right? And so a lot of these people become murderers. They just don't become this type of murderer, right? That's like murders somebody that's a part of the club and does it in a way that's not considered lawful. But all these corporations make decisions that end up causing people pain and suffering and often murdering people, right? You know, the way that America was conquered, you know, the third master Sajmark system said that the expansion or the connection of people across the globe was necessary and a good thing. You know, people interacting from different cultures around the world. You know, before it was just completely isolated because until ships became a thing. And then, of course, airplane travel, but ships mostly. Because, you know, the amount of people that would go from one, you know, to an ocean away, you know, would have to sail across an ocean. And, you know, when people could connect that way, it was important that happened, that cultures would come together. And there's so much diversity among human cultures, right? But the slaughter of people that happened was not a historical necessity. That part was just human beings being shitty, right? And, you know, in the case of Europeans, because all these other things happened. Like people engaged in slavery across the globe. Almost all cultures engaged in slavery. They also engaged in war. And there was killing and things like this. But nothing to the extent of going out and killing. You know, there's like 110 million Native Americans here because we have this huge country that's just resource abundant, and people were thriving here. There's 110 million, and that was significantly reduced. They've killed like 90 million people. So there's like 30 million native peoples left. I don't know how many native people there are now. I can check that next time I take a break. But that was just brutal, right? To just wipe out all these people. And now they don't do that the same way. They don't kill people just saying, these people are savages and they're just basically animals. We can't even wipe out animal species, right? I'm not saying that like it's like, oh, we can't even wipe out animal species anymore. Not like I'm for that, right? But like, never mind people, but that's what they used to do. They used to say these people are lesser than us, so we can just go take their shit and kill them. And they're going to be a nuisance, so let's just get rid of them. Now what they do is say, oh, these people are terrorists. These people are bad people. Let's go beat the shit out of them and take their stuff. So now they have to have an excuse, right? That's what the UN did in Libya with Gaddafi, but it's completely bullshit.
Or the Unabomber, Kaczynski was Ivy League educated, was quite smart, had a purpose for his killings. So the thing that they're going to try to connect, at least in the investigation, is what happened to lead to this moment? Was it the physical pain that he was in? Was it outside substances, drugs, or whatever else? Was it a radicalization process either through books or online? So they're going to be looking at that got him
online. That would probably be the one that they would say, right? These are all narratives they want to construct. Because, there's murders going on all the time. There's people that are doing bad things and making people suffer. Those are wealthy people. There's financial crimes that take place that cause death and suffering. Just financial transactions that cause people to lose money, cause poverty, cause crime, all these things, right? And these people that this guy was a part of, this club, his family, they do shit like that all the time that affects people in a negative way, sometimes ruin people's lives, sometimes kill people depending on what it is, right? Medical institutions and the rest of it. And so, the medical community is responsible for 250 million deaths a year, and they get away with it. Botched surgeries, bad things happen, and they get away with it, right? But this guy does this, and he's the worst person in the world. And like this, and whatever happened that he heard shit online from people who were talking negatively about the beastly system. These is people who are attacking the system, who are, not going with the way the system works. And I'm not saying people should do what this kid did because, it doesn't make anything better. It's not a proper way to deal with it, right? But it's the way that they're constructing these narratives.
Focused on not just hating our healthcare system, but actually hunting down a CEO.
Chris, we've learned the suspect fell out of contact with his friends and family for about 6 months ahead of the alleged killing. What does that tell you? How critical will his actions during that time period be for investigators and just to kind of understand why he did this?
I think it's going to be critical to piece together what was going on in those 6 months. The fact that his mom filed a missing persons report November 18th strongly suggests that there was deterioration that they noted. His friends noted that he dropped off the radar. All of these things are consistent with, and I don't, provide these kinds of statements lightly, that there's a likely deterioration in his mental state. He actually looks different than he did as the joyful younger man that he was. There's an intensity that is about him that he did not used to have. I believe that there's a chance that he could have a significant mental deterioration. That doesn't change the fact.
Because he had the bloop. Did he get the bloop?
That he had a grievance, that it was likely based in his own personal experience and then learning about the experiences of others and then immersing himself in the materials in books that he was reading.
Okay, so if he was angry at insurance companies, it would be the insurance companies didn't pay for proper medical care. And so he wasn't able to get the care that he needed. His parents donated $1 million to a pool at a university. Like he was it wasn't like he was the black sheep of the family and a screw up. Whatever he was doing, like whatever he was doing post graduating from college, people go through whatever they're going through. He wasn't living at home. And, they probably didn't have any negative feelings towards him. I mean, unless they're coming out and say, "Oh, this guy's crazy" or whatever. The issue is, this guy can't go back to his family. If this is a real family, and this is a real thing, which it appears to be, he can't go back to his family and run the family business, right? Like he's got to have. If he's an asset, then he has to be disappeared, right? Like he could have been recruited by the CIA and all these things, and started working for whatever it is. But if this was a legitimate story, he would have to be mad at the insurance company, and there's no way that, I don't know what his family's policies were to cut him off and make him pay for his own insurance, but you wouldn't usually see that in most families like this, and certainly an Italian family. They wouldn't want him like getting wrecked for the rest of his life because they weren't willing to pay for quality insurance if he got hurt, right? And what happens when you hear one of your kids gets hurt and has like a severe back injury, and you want to do whatever you can, like even if there's estrangement there. It's the kind of thing that brings people together. You might have petty little family, issues, but then when you're, when something big happens and somebody gets hurt and, there's a hospital involved, you put all that shit aside. And so, like, the whole thing seems not realistic. Like, the narrative itself doesn't hold together, but they can fucking say anything because there's no media that's going to call bullshit, right? And that's their job, to say, this doesn't add up. Let's just scrub his social media and create a new narrative that's not at all like the one that the kid had before that, right?
Deny, defend, delay, or some variant of that, and a couple of other books, as well as his identification with Ted Kaczynski, who was mentioned by our other esteemed guest.
He just found Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and that's an Ivy League guy. So like he just must have that was his guru, his dead guru. Like it's just silly, right?
Here, that led him to justify those other statements that were in that alleged manifesto of the parasites had it coming. And then ultimately...
The alleged manifesto, right? He said he led him to justify in the alleged manifesto. Like he just said it's alleged, right? And then he says, but he justified it in the alleged manifesto. Well, like he didn't justify it if it's alleged, right? It's, if it's alleged, we don't even know if it's attributed to him. Okay, so it's 7.1 million Native American people. We'll get back to the Luigi in a second, but right now there's 7 million Native American people in America. The conservative estimate, the official story, is there's 50 million before the colonization, but it's more likely it's well above 100 million because of the size of the country and just, the time period. But whatever it is, right, that's a significant reduction in people. And whatever you want to say about that, that's fucked, right? It's bad. Like that's a bad thing when you wipe out 80 million people or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's, it's over a period of time. And if that population is diminishing now, like I don't know what the census is, I didn't look into it, but if there was 8 million people last year or 10 million people 10 years ago, and their population is diminishing, then this continues. Where Native peoples are being, the genocide is still going on. It's an ongoing thing, right? Anyways.
Prepare, which is, these are the steps that a person goes through to ultimately do and involve themselves in this kind of targeted violence.
Yeah, Julia, I just want to play again the incident as he was being led into court today and ask you about it.
Okay, so I want to show this, but they're showing it here for us.
Oh my God! And completely out of touch.
It's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people.
And an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
I mean, there are some people out there who are portraying this guy as like an avenger for, a cause. What I don't understand...
They both are reacting to that. Like, oh, that's completely wrong. We're experts on CNN. The healthcare system is fucked. And 250 million people are killed a year. But it's all the suffering that's involved. I've suffered from, medical things, right? Like the least amount, sometimes I need allopathic medicine. Sometimes all of us do, just because of everything. Or it's something that, and we can choose not to use it at all and just suffer whatever it is, right? But, once in a while I have to go on antibiotics and, some of these other things, right? But for the most part, I avoid the allopathic medicine like the plague. And there's some things that I just would rather, I'll just die. It's just, I would not, especially at my age as I get older. And if it's going to be something where, there's going to be, I don't think if I got cancer and I had to get radiation that I would do any of those types of things, right? I would try to heal it. Right now, preventative medicine is the most important thing for me. My wife and I do quite a bit of that, right? But if we had cancer, then it would be, do I want to get chemotherapy or poison these things, right? Probably not. And so, it's just whatever. People have to make I'm not telling people what to do, obviously, but this is just the way I feel about it. But the system itself, the insurance and all, is a bad system, and people have been hurt by it. And then there's all the post-COVID things, and the people who have suffered from the bloop, right? All the things that people have suffered from in COVID and post-COVID issues that people have had, and then all the other things that have happened, right? And so it isn't like there isn't justifiable anger. It isn't like people haven't been killed at their hands, legally killed, right? Master Chargy, the third master of the system, said a lawyer is a licensed liar, just like a doctor is a licensed killer, which was very strong language from him, in a positive organization about spiritual upliftment. And he had plenty of doctors that were part of the mission, right, that did Sajmarg, but this is how he categorized these people, as in a global situation, as somebody coming from India, right, where they're, doctors are licensed killers.
And it's how much is it just he read stuff and is impassioned and did this, which seems less likely to me.
We got to scrub the internet because people are reading stuff and doing shit like this.
Then he had some severe mental health issue that then he started to focus on this particular thing through that lens.
Yes, or it could be all of the above, that there's mental deterioration, then it's linked to what we understand is a physical ailment. And then this is the key and goes to what
former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, an evil organization. And I give the intelligence community much more of a break than the majority of truthers, because I know that evil stuff has to be done to keep an evil empire going. And once you realize we're an evil empire, as much as you want to think about America being the cul-de-sac and the neighborhood you grew up with or the good things that America has to offer, they come at a price of other people suffering. 50, 60, 100 million Native Americans having to die for America to be conquered and this land to be, this prosperous land to be taken over by colonization, right? Like, that's evil shit that happened. And, we all live with that. That's not, that's evil empire stuff. That's just one amongst many tragedies and horrible things that has had to happen to keep America going, to keep the British Empire, the European Empire going, right? A lot of evil stuff has to be done to keep it going. And so, these people who do those evil things that we all benefit from, then we want to criticize them, but we would have a collapsed system. And I'm not justifying any of these things. I'm saying if you want the system to keep on going, that's what has to happen. And so it's better for the system to collapse. I say this all the time, but most of us dread that in some way or another because it would be really hard because we're not prepared. We don't have a plan B. And so these people that keep it going by doing evil shit, we condemn them, but we're hypocrites in the sense that, they're doing things that we want them to do even though we don't want them to do it, right? We don't want to know about it because we don't want to see our country the way it really is as an evil empire.
he was saying there, than him creating a narrative of why it wasn't just about him, right? And now this is exactly what Kaczynski did. And the ties, the clear ties between Kaczynski and this.
Again, like this guy mentioned Ted Kaczynski in his report that they're claiming came from him. And we don't know if it is, right? Now, how many kids go and look up Ted Kaczynski? And what Ted Kaczynski did was a Unabomber was completely different than this guy going out and waxing a CEO on the street of New York, Manhattan. And, so, but they want, this guy's the same kind of profile. They have different profiles, right? This is the guy, overachieving, really smart person who, sees the system in a way that really smart people are eventually going to see it and will have to reconcile it one way or another. At some point, as a really smart person, you're going to see some of the stuff in the system that you know is like wrong and evil. And what do you do with it? You know, Buddha, this is similar to the Siddhartha the Buddha, who was a prince that was shielded away from all the ugly things that were going on in the kingdom. He was just in a castle in this private area that had nice gardens and beautiful places. And he went outside, he wandered around the streets and saw, like, you know, just people being sick and crime and people dying, and he couldn't believe it. And he said, well, I'm going to renounce my throne and going to go meditate and figure out how to solve this, because I don't want to be happy if not everybody can be happy, right? So that's how Buddhism started. He went under the Bodhi tree, right, the Bodhi tree, and, you know, meditated and started for so many years, right, and then vowed to, you know, make the world a better place in this way, right? That's get rid of all this pain and suffering, which of course can't happen. It's a, you know, it's a false movement in different ways, but the, you know, the sincerity of this guy Siddhartha was, you know, something that could be commended, who lived in privilege himself and renounced all that so that, you know, everyone could have what he had, right?
Case in terms of creating a narrative that the killing isn't just a killing, it's a killing for a purpose. That purpose then elevates the person, right? So they become some sort of cult leader. And remember, because
you mean like Robin Hood or whatever, or all these people who do this, you know, when like that show 24, which I never saw, where the guy was torturing somebody, and it became justified. You know, the Dirty Harry character that was celebrated, people going rogue and taking justice into their own hand, vigilante justice, killing people who have hurt other people, like some CEO who's the villain. Like in a TV movie, the CEO would be a villain. Like a movie or TV show about something like this, the CEO would be a villain, and his company would kill so many people. Like if this was a narrative you'd see in a popular action adventure, and the killer would be the hero. Like that's how it would be framed in so many different narratives that they've put out. There's so many stories like this where some evil CEO, some rich person, and people hate these rich motherfuckers, right? I mean, that's why there's no sympathy, because it's in movies and TV shows where these people are being demonized, and this guy would be considered a hero. So don't pretend this is just out of people's imagination. There's a level of indoctrination that goes along with these narratives that's in pop culture, that's in movies and TV shows and books and all these rest of these things.
Kaczynski also had followers like this. We didn't have the internet or social media, but he had a lot of people who were kind of into him. And we see that now. And the danger of that isn't simply it's wrong, it's disgusting, he murdered and assassinated a person. But then you get into the copycat aspects of this. People who do not have...
So this is the thing, copycats. They're big on copycat. Like these other guys will come out and write manifestos, and they'll you know, they have a big club, right? It's just...
the mental deterioration or the physical deterioration, and just decide this is the way forward.
It's just the same old blah, blah, blah bullshit that they say every time. So this is a long video on CNN. Police looking at Luigi Mangione's, I don't think they pronounce the E. Mangione is probably how they say it. Medical history as an alleged motive for healthcare CEO killing, I guess it would say. They cut off the title. And this is multiple pieces in this video. It starts off with Droopy Dog Jake Tappers and then goes to Wolf Blitzers. I don't know how much we'll get through. I watched a bunch of this. There's some new information, and they're repeating some of the same old bullshit, right?
We've learned so many new details about the suspect.
So many new details. Look at her shake her head. Yeah, we got the 411.
His attorney and this case in just the last few minutes. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Jake, so I can tell you that Luigi Mangione left that courthouse a lot calmer than what you just showed your viewers when he headed in, when he was screaming things. Different scenario when he was leaving that court hearing. He was also quiet during the beginning of this court hearing, only answering rather twice to the judge when asked questions. He said, I do, when he was sworn in, and yes, sir, answering the judge when he asked if he understood his right to contest this extradition. I can tell you that he was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Our reporter inside the courtroom said
okay, let's get all these details. He was wearing orange. Was it orange? Is that his color? Is he a winter or a spring? How does what?
A disheveled collar.
Disheveled collar. It's totally like a guy would shoot a CEO kind of collar.
shackled at his hands and at his wrists. And his attorney, who you just mentioned, we have since learned, Jake, just in the last few minutes, that he has been hired to represent Luigi Mangione, that this was not a court-appointed defense attorney. And during this hearing, he, as you just heard him say, fought this extradition. He also was trying to fight, basically trying to get Mangione out on some sort of bail, saying he's got no criminal history. He can be, tracked by GPS if necessary, to which the district attorney there in Blair County basically lined some of the evidence that they have against him, including the fact that he was found with $8,000 cash, $2,000 of foreign currency.
Okay, so where did he get all that money? Like, he couldn't afford proper health care. He came from a multi-million-dollar family that's paying for his lawyer, which they're going to get into, and all these things, and somehow he had shitty health care, like the same health care like we have. But he had shitty health care, and somehow the health care company let him down, and that led him down this dark path with the pain. They're going to get into this in a moment here. It's just silly. Like, the story doesn't add up, right? Like, why would he be suffering something that, from a health care company when his parents could have paid for any number of surgeries he would have had, any medical procedures he would have needed? And he has all this money. Where's that money coming from? He's got $8,000 on him, right?
Passport said that he was evading police for several days, was transient. So, of course, as we know, he is still behind bars, the judge denying that request for some sort of bail. And he is allowed to fight this extradition. That is his right. What we understand now happens is that his attorney, that defense attorney, has 14 days to file a writ of habeas corpus. This basically allows him to say, you know what, this is not the guy that needs to be extradited. Of course, it's a stretch, but it does basically extend these proceedings. And it also, if you think about it, gives the NYPD, gives investigators more time to sort of...
this is why when they kill the guy, when there's something like this and the guy's killed, it makes it so much easier because there's no trial, there's no due process, there's no... he gets to tell his side of the story kind of thing. This is why I'm talking about controlling the narrative. Because once he's dead, you can say whatever you want about him. And there's no, they don't have to pretend it's alleged or it's, this is just circumstantial or whatever. They just, lay out their bullshit and convict the guy in the court of public opinion, but not anymore because they're going to say this, that it's coming up here about how, they're going to address the fact that most people are on his side, which is, not what they were going for. Maybe they are. I don't know.
To collect evidence, build their case against them, and then they will all be back in court to discuss next steps in this court process. Jake.
And Bryn, what more are we learning about the suspect, Luigi Mangione?
Yeah, so we are learning, the New York Times is actually reporting that his family grew very concerned about him at one point, actually filing a...
okay, you're not learning that because I knew about this like yesterday afternoon, and this was 5 o'clock last night.
The missing persons report on November 18th with San Francisco. Now, we understand from the NYPD that he does have some ties to San Francisco. We're not quite sure of when that happened, but that is a key note. It also tracks with what we've been learning from his social media footprint is that, he was very active on social media for quite a while, posting pictures of friends, his travels, and then sort of went dark where people were reaching out to him wondering if he was okay. One person asked, "Are you going to honor your RSVP to my wedding?" So it did seem that he went dark for a while, and it does appear the New York Times reporting that his family also very concerned, so much so that they filed this missing persons report.
Okay, so what happened during that period of time? Was he turned into an asset, right? Like, what would happen in that period of time? Did he get into conspiracy theories? Was he watching conspiracy videos? Like, what? Like, we're going to find out about that time at some point. Like, they haven't released that, but here, they're telling you this is there'll be something. I'll come back in a couple of days if I'm still covering this, and there'll be something about what happened during that time, which is part of this whole narrative that they roll out. These packages of information that they drop on different, consecutive days.
Last month, Jake.
All right, Bryn Gingras, thanks so much. Let's bring in CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller, former NYPD Chief of Department Ken Cr1me, and Ellie Honig, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Ellie, let me start with you. What do you make of the fact that this defense attorney was hired, not court-appointed, and also what do you make of what we just heard from him?
Well, Jake, it means that
the court-appointed ones suck. I mean,
Family has enough money to pay for a private attorney, and they've elected to do that. Regarding the extradition, it's really important to understand this is a bureaucratic headache for prosecutors, but it's not going to actually interfere with the substantive prosecution in any way. What's likely to happen now is a few weeks from now, we will have a hearing. There will be a hearing in Pennsylvania State Court. All that prosecutors have to show.
Okay, so let's go for it, because let's go to this part here.
Investigation. The arrest is really only the first piece of it. There is so much more that has to be done here to get this case ready for a successful prosecution.
Okay, so I don't give a shit about this legal stuff because...
And the spent shells recovered from the scene.
John, what are you hearing from your sources today?
Okay, this thing right here. What this... Actually, I wanted to hear this because...
The 225 or so hours that he spent in New York City is possible to really be able to almost show the jury a movie of his movements to successfully conclude that this is in fact the same person who's responsible for this crime. At the same time, they're continuing to test the forensic evidence. They're going to start to get DNA results back. At some point, they will get a DNA sample from Mangione to do a direct comparison to any DNA that was recovered off that water bottle at the crime scene or the Kind bar wrapper at the crime scene.
Okay, so he dropped DNA evidence at the crime scene. He dropped a water bottle and a Kind bar wrapper. He ate a Kind bar, like what, right before he killed the guy, right after? Or he just dropped the wrapper off? He went to the trash can, threw away a water bottle and a Kind bar.
And of course, they're trying to match the ballistics on the firearm that was in his possession to any slugs that were recovered and the spent shells recovered from the scene.
Well, they said it was a completely different gun that he used during the assassination and then the one that he had in his possession. But now they're saying it was a murder weapon, which he kept on them, which he kept on him.
What are you hearing from your sources today as this investigation plays out with Mangione in custody in Pennsylvania?
You know, they're continuing to try, as Ken kind of indicated, to backtrack. There are gaps in the story. Of course, there's gaps in that movie they're trying to make, which would really ideally show every place he went of every minute of every day in New York City. But there are larger...
But the, modern tracking, because the guy had a phone, and they can't they can't track all the evidence. I mean, it's just silly. Like, he has disappeared for months, and we don't know where he was. Like,
gaps.
Like, we don't have enough surveillance. Like, how much more surveillance do you want, right?
Story before that, which is when he went off the grid, where did he go off the grid? San Francisco.
Okay. Did he go out and live in the woods? Because he wasn't off the grid. Like, he just wasn't connecting with people on the internet. Like, not signing into Facebook and not checking social media or not posting on social media isn't going off the grid, right? Like, just if you're not talking to people in your family. I mean, I'm off of the grid almost, like, other than making these videos, I'm off the grid most of the time, right? And so, I mean, come on, it's like silly.
Francisco seems to be a pointer there. What, if anything, did that have to do with his what appears?
You're angry. You're so angry. Why are you so angry, bro? Bro, what's bothering you? And they're pushing, like, they're pressuring him. There's a guy with an alleged bad back.
Which is when he went off the grid. Where did he go off the grid? San Francisco seems to be a pointer there. What, if anything, did that have to do with his what appears?
Why was he so riled up? Like, why is he so angry there? Getting out of the car and going in there. Why is he so angry?
To be self-radicalization. So they're working on that, but they have core responsibilities that hinge on
core factions.
This extradition, which is Pennsylvania has the gun, they have the body has the fingerprints.
Is that the gun? So before they were saying it wasn't the same gun. Now they're saying it is the same gun. That he 3D printed a gun. They were saying that the gun that he used at the shooting was something different. Now they're saying it's the same gun. Like, it's gone back and forth. There's so much, like inconsistency in the story that they're convicting this guy in the court of public opinion without having anything, getting their story straight, right?
In terms of the prisoner, also the DNA. So they may have to get warrants to travel to Pennsylvania to obtain their own fingerprints, their own DNA, to test fire that gun. Pennsylvania can't simply hand all that over to them because if this process drags out and the judge, says, produce the evidence of your crime, They can't say we lent it out. So there's a little codependency going on there, but it's all going to work because they've done this before.
Ellie, what do prosecutors in New York have to show in this case, and why charge the suspect with second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder?
Yeah, Jake, a lot of people are asking that exact question. So under New York state law, first-degree murder only applies to very narrow circumstances. For example, where the victim is a judge, a police officer, a first
responder. So those people are more important.
Responder, or where the murder involves a murder for hire, or where there's torture involved in the case, or where the murder is committed in the course of some other crime, like a robbery or a terroristic act. And as far as we know, none of those features apply to the murder so far. And so that's why it seems that New York prosecutors have charged a second-degree murder. What they will have to show is that Mr. Mangione intentionally killed his victim here. And if that's proven...
I think it was an accidental. I mean, judging from that footage, it looks like an accident.
He's looking at a mandatory minimum of 15 years behind bars, no parole, and he could be behind bars for as long as life, depending if and when he ever does get parole.
And Ken, one of the reasons why...
It's just crazy.
This story is significant and we're giving so much attention to it is because of the response we're hearing from many members of the public. An NYPD intelligence report obtained by CNN notes the positive online reaction to this murder of this United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. The intel report says, quote, based on observed initial online reactions to the shooting, including celebrations of the killing of a health insurance executive, there is a risk that a wide range of extremists may view Mangione as a martyr and an example to follow.
Oh, my God. So this is the whole thing. They're going to be rolling this out like this is going to be their new thing, right? Just because people are rooting for this doesn't mean they're going to do it themselves, right? And the bigger question is why? Like, why are the majority of people on his side? Why are they looking at him as a Robin Hood? I mean, partly it's because they've been trained by TV shows and movies about such things. And CEOs are demonized, right? But when greedy, rich people die and the business that they conduct hurts people, they're considered a villain. And when you watch a person like this die in a movie or TV show, when they, you see what this person's done to people. And again, I don't know this guy or the whole thing. And, the whole thing to me is just like watching a movie anyway, right? Because I don't, it's not real to me. It might be real, but I don't see it as that. It doesn't feel like a real thing. It seems like something I'm watching on TV. Or in this case, a computer, which is the same thing, right? But if you knew all the things that his company did, all the people that have had issues with United Healthcare, all the suffering that's caused, all the money that he made off of those people suffering, and you put that into a narration of a movie or TV show script, he would be considered the villain. And then when he was killed, people would celebrate who were watching the movie. Like when you were seeing a guy who's portrayed as the bad guy or the villain, and that villain gets killed by the hero, who is, the person that's going to kill the villain, right? In so many different stories, the hero kills the villain. And so if that's what's happening here in terms of like this, narrative, and the people are seeing it that way, is because we've been trained to see things in such a way, right? And so like think about the whole thing and what it represents to where people are at. And if people just went out and started waxing these people, these CEOs, the majority of people would be 100% behind them, right? Like the establishment has to protect itself, but at some point the establishment would have to realize, and again, this whole thing seems completely contrived, that what you're doing here is, there's a reason why people are not liking you and the people that run the system, right?
Unquote. Have you seen this type of response for a suspected murderer before?
Yeah, no, certainly not in these circumstances, right? And as was indicated, the outpouring of support is really unusual and very shocking, right? This isn't somebody who maybe is going to leverage a claim of self-defense, where you could see that there was some sympathy involved or...
It's not shocking at all, right? So I just explained it. Like what you guys think is like, yeah, I'm not agreeing with what he did. I don't care about, all this stuff is just like me watching a show. Like I don't have any emotional reaction to it, right? But I understand why the majority of people are on his side. If it's the majority, and we know how the internet works, it's not shocking at all. Because when a CEO dies, people aren't like, oh my God, what a tragedy. Like, people don't have a high opinion of these rich people. Maybe Elon Musk has some supporters, and, some people like, Steve Jobs has a fan club. The majority of people don't like rich CEOs, right? It's just, and then rich CEOs are very seldom the hero. Like, what, you got Batman, like Bruce Wayne? Like, what are the really rich people that are actually heroes? The majority of them aren't.
Somebody who was being victimized, maybe with a long history as a domestic violence victim, and you could see people sympathizing with the offender there / victim. This is very, very different, and we saw that outpouring of support on social media. We see, comments really backlash against the McDonald's employee who called in the tip in the first place.
You mean the rat? The McDonald's guy, rat.
So, I think that there is a fear. Anytime you have a really notorious crime that gets this level of public attention, you're always worried about, is this going to inspire somebody else to kind of do something similar?
Because the copycat. They got to get the copycat stuff. Look out for the copycats. There's going to be copycats. They're all going to write. They're all going to do the exact same things. They're going to write their manifestos, and it's going to be. We better clamp down so there's no more copycats. We got to take away people's rights because we don't want people copycatting this guy. We got to make sure that people's rights are changed and all the things that we have to do that we can say that we can do to justify stopping something like this in the future. Okay, so there's a little bit of the Wolf Blitzer thing. Let's get into that.
Kara, we just heard from Mangione's defense attorney. What did he say? And take us inside the extradition hearing.
That's right, Wolf. We're just hearing from Luigi Mangione's attorney, Thomas Dewey. He spoke to reporters saying that he expects Mangione...
Dickie. His name is Dickie.
...will plead not guilty to the gun charges in Pennsylvania. And he says when these murder charges are filed in New York, he anticipates he will plead not guilty to those as well. Here's a little bit more about what he said.
I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. So that's, like I said...
It clearly says Thomas Dickie here.
Earlier, and I wasn't kidding around. A couple of things. If you're going to report something, report it accurately. And remember, and this is not just a small thing, the fundamental concept of American justice is the presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable
doubt. Like, this is a rich family, and this is the guy they got, right?
doubt, and I've seen zero evidence at this point.
Now, those comments came after the court hearing, but right before it got underway, our cameras captured...
She's really intense. Look, she's really into this.
Mangione walking from police custody into the courtroom. There was a bit of a scuffle, and he shouted words to a reporter. Take a listen to that.
Well, let's see what happened here. This hasn't been covered yet.
Oh, my God. And completely out of touch. And the insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Wolf, once inside the courtroom, Mangione entered wearing an orange prison jumpsuit.
We couldn't see that for ourselves.
His collar was ruffled. He was shackled.
Disheveled. It was a disheveled. Look, his collar's ruffled. He's guilty as fuck. Look at that collar. Look at that collar, Wolf. Look at that disheveled collar.
At the hands and at his feet. And he sat down at the table. He had a piece of paper with him that he unwrapped that was kind of crinkled. Now, he didn't speak much.
Wait, he had a crinkled piece of paper? Guilty. Fucking guilty.
Inside the courtroom, despite what his outburst outside of it, he only confirmed to the judge that, yes, he understood that he had a right to contest these charges. Now, his lawyer did most of the speaking. He said that they would fight extradition. He also tried...
Okay, let's move forward here.
...in this case, all as part of this effort to get Mangione back to New York to face these murder charges. Wolf?
All right, Kara Scannell reporting for us. Kara, thank you very much. Our legal and law enforcement experts are standing by. They're joining us right now. John?
Okay, so there's a medical history thing here somewhere. Let me stop this and see if I can find it. Okay, so they have the 3 shows that are on at 5, 6, and 7, ending with Aaron Burnett here. And this guy's going to say this guy's basically guilty when he's shouting outside the courtroom, right? The court area. Now, the information that you're being told, the majority of it is... There's nothing that you can convict him of, right? There's some pictures of some guy they've shown you that's him, that's with a mask on. But when you see the guy doing the shooting, you don't see the mask. You see a guy who, has a hoodie on, so you don't see the guy's face, right? So there's no indication it's him. You just see somebody with, anybody wearing a hoodie, and you see basically the height. You assume it's a dude, right? But again, it could be a woman. Like so, it's not. It doesn't look like he's probably about 5'10", something like that. So there's no conclusive evidence. Then everything else is what they're saying. You're trusting the law enforcement and the media to present this information to you. And those of us who don't trust them, then it's not, it could be the truth, but it could be lies. And so showing pictures of this guy going around the town with a bike and then on a bus and these various places where they got images and videos of him, there's, all right, that could be that kid, but we don't know if it's that kid who was in the original shooting, and we don't know if there was real bullets used or if that was even, now with CGI and deep fake. We don't know if any of that's real, right? So, like, it's all suspect. And so it's not a slam dunk, but they've already convicted this guy, this asshole right here. Listen to this.
This is him showing himself, showing what he cares about, which is himself, obviously.
Okay, so this is your expert testimony.
I mean, he's not
former FBI counterterrorism agent.
Not distraught, not going in there with his head held low, not going in there like he's embarrassed by this. This is his moment. And apparently in the last 5 or 6 days, he's probably looked at a lot of social media and seen how many adulating fans he has around the world.
Yeah, you sound like a real asshole, too. Like, you sound like a real narcissist as well. Like, we're getting more to know you than we are him because of what he yelled here.
That are saying he's a hero. These mistaken, misguided people that are trying to say what he did was good. I mean, he committed a cold blood.
These mistaken, misguided people. Who the fuck are you to say that, right? Like, we have our opinions, and our opinions aren't validated by some former FBI counterterrorism agent. You ain't nobody. You ain't fucking God, bro. Like, whatever our opinions are, we're not misguided, right? Because we don't believe you and the fucking morons that make this news program and the people that run the government, because we don't agree with, our opinions. Our opinions are our opinions, right? People can have an opinion that they think this guy's the hero and the other guy's the villain. Like, that's a valid opinion. And it's not just valid in the sense that people get to have their own opinions, but it's valid in the sense that there's evidence to support that, right? Like, what if this guy who is a CEO, and again, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Like, it's just a show. I'm just watching a show. But let's say this character that's the CEO was killed, was going to put in future policies that were going to cause people to suffer and die from lack of having funding for their medical needs, right? And that people would die, like 20 people would die, and many others would suffer because of his actions as CEO of this company, this healthcare company. And so this guy just saved those people's lives. Let's say, of course, this guy dying isn't going to change United Healthcare's policies. So, like, he didn't really, in a sense, save their lives. But, the guy's a villain, right? And so you could justify this in many different ways. And I'm not justifying it anyway because I don't it just looks like something I'm watching on TV. But this asshole, right, has already convicted him without having any evidence that, he's seen that's a slam dunk in terms of, unless you are trusting the intelligence community and the police and the media 100%, and you believe everything that they say, then there's no slam dunk evidence here, right?
Blooded murder, obviously planned it for some time, and now he's basking in the limelight.
He's not been convicted yet. We don't know if that's the case.
This is his moment, his 15 minutes of fame, and he's taking all the advantage he can out of it.
Marielle, there was also a photo.
Yeah. All right. So look at these fucking ghouls here. Look at these 4 fucking ghouls, and telling us, telling people who's the hero, who's not, who's good and who's bad, right? This is like these. I mean, look at these fucking people.
Taken during those moments in the hearing, and as I described,
like this is the one where he looks the angriest. Let's show this one.
The rage is palpable.
There's a rage. I mean, the rage. He's got so much rage, a murderous rage. Look at the murderous rage on this guy.
Sneer, the rage from his eyes, from his expression, the sneer on his face, his mouth, and we also have the mugshot. Now, this is just a straight stare. But when you look at him in these photos, and when you see that outburst, that rage in that still photo, what do you see, Marielle?
Well, there are definitely signs of rage and anger, but here's the
Former FBI senior profiler. You know, we don't trust the FBI. The FBI, you know, whatever they are, the FBI has lost a lot of credit and goodwill in the past so many years. And, you know, these agencies are not like saintly organizations that do good work, right? The intelligence agencies do sneaky shit, lie, and, you know, I mean, they're just not the heroes that we're seeing all the time when we watch a movie where, oh, that guy's in the CIA, and, you know, some heroes in the CIA. And CIA is, of course, worse than the FBI, but the FBI has their own issues. And they've done a lot of bad shit, including what happened at Waco. I mean, they murdered all those people in Waco, and, like, you know, and things like that, where people know that there was, I mean, the evidence that's there was that when they gassed the people, and which was an incendiary gas that they put into these, you know, this building that ignited it and burned alive women and children, right? Like, it's fucked up shit. Like, they've done that.
Here's the conundrum. You have to really look at what his behavior was like. For example, in the car pulling up there before they got him out of the car. Was he cool, calm, and collected? So then he gets out of the car, and then he immediately has this outburst. So was that brought about by the fact
Acting? Was it brought about by acting, perhaps?
that the cameras are on, the media was there, and it immediately put him into the role of wanting a lot of attention. And you have to consider that before you rule it one way or the other. I've seen a lot of offenders, when they go to court, they will act up because it is their time to get that attention, to get that notoriety. The other
Okay, just stop. Like freaking ghouls, like this, the ghoul parade. So this is called CEO Shooter, the chilling inside story. This is done by some sort of local news station. So they're already calling him the CEO Shooter. Like, he's, again, been convicted. And this is a real problem. Aside from how fake this is or how real it is or whatever's going on with all this stuff, you know, how many holes there are in the story, how many things don't add up. All the people that are saying, oh, my God, this is the last guy who would do something like that, all those things, right? There's been no trial, and we've seen, you know, only evidence from one side of the story. We've never heard the guy talk. Like, if he admits to it or he says it's justified or, you know, something like that, right? A manifesto that we have no idea is written by him. I mean, other things are real until you've experienced them. And in a court of law, there would be some more legitimacy, but it could still be controlled and contrived with a hand-picked jury of insiders and, you know, actors or whatever. I mean, none of these things, you know, to me, it's just watching the show, right? But in this show, you've already convicted him, and, like, there isn't enough data there to do that, right? This is literally a news program. The CEO killer.
It has all the hallmarks of a story that really grabs your attention. The healthcare industry, violence in America, proliferation of guns. It's got everything.
It's got it all. Is there a love story there too?
Well, it's the crime that has rocked a megacity and shocked the globe. The CEO of a major health insurer, the victim of a brazen assassination outside a New York City hotel. The alleged killer is this man, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione.
Okay, so must be some foreign country. It sounds like she's Australian, but it could be South African.
An Ivy League graduate with no known criminal record. In this Spotlight digital special, we take an inside look at how this alleged murder unfolded, the key detail behind the assassin's motive, and the disturbing number of supporters rallying.
Why is it disturbing? Like, you know, this is the world you live in now, and if this is really disturbing to you guys, you should be aware that this is not going to get better. Because the more this goes on, the less people are going to trust you and the establishment and the people, you know, the CIA and these other institutions that do this kind of stuff, right? Run these kind of narratives and bullshit that they put out there. All right, so let's move to the next thing here. Okay, so this is an Australian channel here, 7 News Spotlight. CEO killer inside the world's toughest prison. TikTok killer, Phil documentary. I killed a terrorist inside the Lind Cafe siege. Anthony Sarkaruchi's brutal takedown of Donald Trump. Piers Morgan reveals private phone call with Donald Trump, right? So this is, this kind of sensationalistic shit they're pushing here, right? Like, this is a real scumbag fucking channel. I mean, with all the scumbags that are there, this is, this must be the prison that was in Syria, which they're talking about what a horrible person Assad was. All these things where they tell you who the bad guy is. A lot of this stuff is, these are the bad guy, and this is the bad people, and if you like them, you're a bad person, and if you don't understand if you think this person's a good person, then you don't know what's going on, and we should take away your ability to do certain things because you guys all suck because you're backing the wrong person, because we're telling you who the heroes are. If you don't understand, we're mansplaining it to you. If you don't get it, then you're fucked, and you're fucked in the head, and all these things, right?
I think you're all fucked in the head.
Okay, a few more news things to get to here. A little bit of Cr1me's. I don't know how much I can take of him. This is kind of getting long about this thing. But here, Luigi, I knew, was incompatible with the assassin. Ex-roommate speaks out on Mangione. And so it's this guy who was in Hawaii who's making the rounds. It starts off here.
RJ Martin. RJ, you lived with, first off, thank you for being with us. I know
Thanks, RJ.
I know it's difficult to come on and have to talk about something like this.
This has been your 50th show, but thanks. I know how hard it is for you to be interviewed by us people at the mainstream media.
But you lived with Luigi.
Okay, so they were in a shared apartment house, whatever that was. But here they list the things here. 26 years old, graduate of Penn with a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering, valedictorian, Gilman School, arrested with a ghost gun and silencer, reviewed Unabomber manifesto online, part of a wealthy, influential MD family, no criminal history of drug or alcohol issues, history of a back pain injury.
For our community at Surf Break. And he continued on. He did great things when he was with us. He helped spearhead a book club. He was great to other members. He was always giving and considerate and thoughtful.
He's formed his own book club.
I remember cooking meals with him and joking around. Had a great sense of humor. We bonded over working out, over the intellectual conversations we had at book club, and the thoughtful, young man that I got to know. It seems completely incompatible with an assassin.
You've talked about him, the back.
Okay, so again, what they're saying here is whatever you do whatever you do in your life up to the point where you're accused of one of these crimes, right? Whatever you do, whatever kind of person you are, whatever people can say about your character, the people who knew you, the people who loved you, no matter what good works you do, if they decide to say that you did one of these things and they put out all this information, which is all now suspect because of computer manipulation, deep fake, and all that stuff, and they can say anything, and these are untrustworthy organizations, then you're whatever they say you are. Like whatever these people knew beforehand, this guy they knew beforehand, they described. And again, all part of the script or whatever, all part of the show here, right? But whatever you are beforehand and whatever kind of person you establish yourself to be, no criminal record, if they come out and say you did a crime and they put out all this, bullshit or whatever it is, right? And it's supposed to be, you being convicted in the media, not even getting like a fair trial. And even if you get a trial, this thing the court system's being compromised with these, Alex Jones being sued, being given a judgment of $1.4 billion for saying shit about people, right? Like just, way less than the murderer would get, right? In terms of these the outlandish settlement for Trump. So the whole system is compromised. And if no matter what you are as a person, you are what they say you are. And whatever they say you are, and the people who side with your point of view and believe in you, they're fucked too. You're all fucked, right? You're all, some kind of a messed up people because we're telling you who's the heroes and we're telling you what's up because we're the media. and the government that nobody trusts anymore, that has no credibility, right? Like that's where they're going with these things. Okay, so there's just so much of Chris Cuomo's I can take, and I've already got a big dose recently. But he is just such a nightmare. Because let me just start off here.
And completely out of touch and insult the intelligence of the American people.
Would have been nice if they wrote what he said.
Yeah, you low-budget motherfuckers. And News Nation and CNN and the rest of the networks, they wrote what he said.
He was screaming about the injustice of our healthcare pricing and how it is offensive to people's lived experience. And what he didn't say is that he's innocent. And forget the fact that when he sees the cameras, he's like a tiger, but he was a pussy cat when it was just...
Okay, pussy cat. You're such a tough guy, Chris.
Just him and the officers. The message he hissed should be heard.
He hissed, right? Derogatory message.
Healthcare so expensive, so easily denied that it offends people's lived experience with oppressive health insurance. But how would he know?
Okay, so, this is the problem with these pieces of shit, right? Now, Chris Cuomo's said some things there that the other people won't say. Like he's saying that that's a legitimate sentiment, but they won't say it because I don't know how much Pfizer spends on News Nation, but they won't say it because they are just up to their ears in sponsorship with mainstream medical, whether it be insurance companies or pharmaceuticals or whatever it is, right? The mainstream media. So he's admitting that the insurance companies and the healthcare system is really against poor people. And he's not even getting into how crappy the medical care is that makes you sick, pharmaceuticals that make you sick, and doctors' interventions that don't use preventative medicine but only treat a sick patient that becomes a customer, right? That the mainstream medical system looks at you as a customer, and you being sick chronically as a customer is great for them. So they want you to be chronically sick, and they can say whatever they want, but that's the truth. Because it's about money. It isn't about curing people. They're not healers. They're businessmen. And for business, you being sick is important. Everyone knows that. People hearing this are like, yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, who other than people who work in that industry would dispute what I'm saying? It's a for-profit medical system that's more about business than it is about healing people or preventing them and keeping them healthy. Healthy people are bad for the for-profit part of the business, and that's the main part, right? But him saying that this guy's the problem, because no matter what you think about this guy, he just said something that's true, but now he's going to get into how he's the problem and not the system, because it's the system that's the problem. This is what I always talk about. They never criticize the system in a real way. They criticize parts of it, the deep state for Trumpers and those people, but the whole system, because we're an evil empire, and we mistreat people, and we mistreat the environment, and we go against the will of God, and we break up the family, and we indulge in things we shouldn't indulge in, and all of us are a part of it. That's the difference of what I say and everybody else says, at least most people say, is that we're all a part of this thing. Let me come back to that.
He had a bad back and a surgery, but there's no reason to believe he was left broke or broken by a horror story with an insurance company. His lived experience was making money off health care. His family owned nursing homes that made them rich.
You mean like the nursing homes your brother stuck COVID people in? People sick with COVID and killed elderly people and then tried to hide the numbers? Is that what you're talking about, right? Like this guy is, look at him. Like they look similar, right? And so, I'm a part Sicilian, like I've been saying. I'm a quarter Sicilian. And I know about Cuomo from his dad, Mario Cuomo, because my dad was happy that there was Italian mayor of New York. My family's originally from New Jersey. And we'd visit my family in New Jersey, and there's all these Italian people. Like, it's just a hotbed. There's lots of Italians in Connecticut, but there are a lot there. And, I kind of identify with them, but not really. Like, I just don't, I don't identify with most people. Like, even being an American, I am an American, but, I just don't, I don't feel like me and most people are on the same page, right? Even as a kid. But I'm part Italian. And so his dad and his family were like Italian royalty. because his dad was the first mayor of New York that was Italian, at least the one that I knew of. And then, of course, his brother became governor, and he became this famous journalist. And they're all very wealthy family, connected family, and so is this guy's here. And so anything he says about this guy, he's saying about himself. Because he's doing the same thing this guy does. He's pretending he's one of you when he's one of them. And that's what he's criticizing this guy for. Because this guy comes from a connected family. I'm now talking about mob, but maybe, who knows. But at least in terms of the money, they're legitimized now, right? And again, that's not, just because they're Italian, whatever. Cuomo and this guy's family are wealthy people. And they happen to be Italian. And they're a part of the club, right? His family is instrumental in the government. This guy's got an uncle or a cousin or whatever he is who's a member of the government, and they're rich businessmen, and they're a part of the club, right? They're all part of the club.
Seven-figure donations to hospitals, paid for him to go to the Ivy League, to live in Hawaii, to create his best life.
Again, to try to demean him when you're the exact same piece of shit.
My point is not to diminish the outrage about health care, or even to diminish him, but to source where what we're seeing with him comes from.
Again, the real issue here is the healthcare system sucks, which you have never covered. You apologized, or you backed Fauci. You were a Fauci supporter. You were a piece of shit, who pushed all the COVID shit, you and your brother. You pushed all the COVID shit. You pushed back against shit like ivermectin that you're now using because you have long-term COVID. At least that's what you claim, right? And so the problem is the system. People are also the problem. We're all a part of the system. But the system itself is fucked. We're an evil empire, and we, do bad shit to keep our lifestyle going. And people, we outsource that to evil people who do the things that need to be done to keep America from falling into the abyss of entitlement and, just the test of time. Empires don't last very long, right? And we have all the signs of a collapsing empire. But our healthcare system is completely fucked, and that's the big takeaway here. Not that this kid is some 26-year-old kid. Well, this is what he says here.
This guy is part of a problem that is harder to fix than healthcare or any corporate issue. He is proof of a new fundamentalism. Appropriated oppression.
Are you shitting me? This is your take on this thing? This is your take, you privileged piece of shit? Appropriated, what do you say?
Appropriated oppression.
Appropriated oppression. This is his liberal piece of shit take on this thing.
In this case, the anger of those who get done dirty by big health insurers. And he's not alone. He reminds me of white kids I've seen turning protests about police using excessive force into riots, or more recently, like the kids on campus wearing the Hamas headgear. There is a new wave of people right here who have decided the best way to address perceived injustice is to pretend to inhabit the victim role, as if...
Okay, so let me tell you why this guy's an absolute piece of shit. I talk about victimization better and more than anybody. Victim consciousness, how it's used as a weapon. And people do this across the board, right? And we're all responsible for our own lives. I talk about this in terms of samskaras, in terms of past lives, in terms of a soul's choice. And there's no accidents. If you believe in God and you believe in a soul, then everything that you are experiencing is chosen. Your narrative of your life, the things that you're going to experience, you're experiencing them for a reason. Maybe because of something you did in previous existence, maybe because of some need for that experience in this life to move forward. But being a victim is the opposite of that. And it's fundamentally dishonest, right? But what this piece of shit is saying here, well, first of all, he's talking about a time in your life when you're in your early 20s. And so it's different, of course, with the internet now, and there's some things that are different, but it's always the same. At some point, you leave the home of your parents, right? And you spend significant time away from them. And, this happens even with divorce. When my ex left and went back to America and I was still in India, I got a much clearer perspective within just a period of a week, than I had in years, because her consciousness and her point of view and her whatever she was doing, her reality was distorting my personal, situation. This is what they call Stockholm syndrome. That when you're involved in something, like let's say you're in war, and you get into the war shit, and you do shit that you would never do in your your suburban home or your country home or your urban home in America, right? And you become a completely different person as a soldier acting in war, and you do things, and you come back to America, and you're like, holy shit, I do all that stuff, right? And it's hard to process. This is the PTSD. And so, when you get away from a situation, like you might be completely embroiled in your job, and your job might dominate your whole life. It's so intense, your job, and, whatever it is. And then you retire, and immediately everything changes because your job is now like just been diminished. It used to be something that was so important, just like your relationship. Your kids move out of your house, right? But as a young person, you've lived with your parents your whole life, and your parents, whatever you might hate them and you might disagree with them, but they influence the way that you see the world. And then when you leave, most times when you go to college, and then the years afterwards, you start realizing things because you're now responsible, accountable, and you start making more your own decisions, and you have your own opinions. And you can have those opinions because now you're supporting yourself and you're away from your parents, right? And kids who go to college get outraged about things that they now find out about. Because inevitably, when you go to college, you hear about some injustice, and you're naive to the extent that the whole world is injustice. You haven't really experienced it. It's like what I was saying about Siddhartha the Buddha, that you come out of a situation where you're kind of shielded from a lot of the shit that goes down in real life. And so for those people who do that, especially wealthy people who are used to the privileges that they had, and now they see things that are, that they see other people suffering, and they start to react, and maybe they protest, maybe they do whatever they do. And it does nothing. It has no value. It's a time in your life, there's this thing called individuation that you go through. And so, yeah, there's some things with that. But you're just learning to be your own person away from your family. That's all this is. And then your reaction does nothing because young people protesting has no bearing on anything unless it's going to affect some company's monetary, their income. Like if they get blacklisted by young people, if young people turn on a company or a trend or something, that's bad for them. Like they've turned on CNN and MSNBC. They don't want to listen to this bullshit anymore, and even Cr1me's here. And so young people want no part of these guys, and that's a problem for them because there's no future where they're going to come back to something that they already have decided is not where that you get your information. But in terms of everything else, they have no money, no influence, and they're just considered young hotheads. Like everyone knows what young people do, and just like teenagers or whatever, and people don't listen to them. I mean, they listen to them maybe when there's some kind of vote or whatever. But if they listen to them, they would be changing their policies towards the Palestinian people and Israel. And they're not going to do that. The young people, for the most part, have spoken, and they're anti what's going on, the genocide in that area, right? And so when these kids grow up, some of them still cling to the things that they believed in. One of those people is Cr1me, for example, right? And some of us in the truth community in a different way. That we never stop finding there's cracks in the system and finding injustice or lies or whatever it is, right? Like some people are just more, it's just not a phase for them. But all of us who do that, we have almost virtually zero influence. Like somebody who does have influence, like Cr1me or Aaron Rodgers, as soon as they came out against the bogus healthcare system and didn't want to get what was prescribed to them, they were immediately demonized, ostracized. They tried to cancel them. They lost money. They were fined. I mean, certainly Cr1me did, right? And so even somebody with influences immediately loses it when you go up against the beast, because the beast is always all-knowing and all-seeing. I talk about this as being someone with a master's in counseling. There are all these diagnoses in the DSM-5 about what's wrong with you. But nowhere in those diagnoses do they attribute any responsibility to the fucked up system that causes people to be screwed up and mentally ill. And all these things, a lot of these diagnoses didn't exist before modern whatever it was. Some of it's neurasthenia because of electricity electricity disrupts the human system, and now with 5G and all these other things beaming around your house, it confuses people and it hurts them spiritually. And then, of course, the toxins in the water and the environment and the food, poisons that distort your reality and make you unclear, make you, have mental symptoms. And then all the other bad things that go along with it. An unnatural system, people being away from nature, being away from a family unit, not living like normal, natural people. And so all those things contribute to mental illnesses, depression, and all the rest of them. But the mental institutions, the psychological world, the psychiatrists, they don't attribute any blame to the system. It's always your fault that you're fucked up. I mean, that's how they look at it. This is what he's saying here, right? When the system sucks, like just admit that the system sucks and it negatively affects all of us. We're not victims of the system because we all like parts of the system. We all contribute to the system, right? My brother, there's a saying, I think it's an Italian saying. My brother used to say it, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. Like it's an all or nothing thing. You can't just like parts of the system and reject other parts. And that's, in a way what Cr1me is saying here. But this is not just this kid and these other kids. It's everybody. Stop complaining about a system that you're benefiting from and that you love. Either reject the system altogether and go do something else, or stop complaining about it. That's like a valid position. But the issue is here, people don't understand what the system has done to them because they have no other reference point of what they would be like without the system, right? We have a bad system. It's a demonic system. It's an evil system. It disconnects people from the divinity within them. It breaks up the family, and it encourages us to live in a way. It doesn't encourage us. It forces us to live in a way that's not natural to us. And we all react to it whatever way we react to it, right?
If they live it, which they don't. The problem with that is the pretend leads them too often to the extreme, where they are not the change agents, but proof of what needs to change.
Wait, they need to change, these kids? Or is it the people that hold the power? And is it the system itself, right? The whole system needs to come down. Don't blame, they're the symptom. And this is what young people do. And this is why he's a piece of shit, because he's a gatekeeper. And he's somebody who takes money from the people who are doing the damage, right? Like at CNN, Pfizer, and those big pharma companies were paying his salary. He has millions of dollars in Pfizer money, right, that he got through these advertising agencies that CNN got their money from to pay him with, right?
They become what they say they oppose. There are many causes.
Okay, so that, and another thing where you just said they become what they say they oppose, like all these people who grew up in the 60s, all these boomers who were radicalized and were, protesting peace and things. And some of them found, organic foods, which was good. Some of them found spiritual movements, like they went to India, which was good, which benefited me. Some of these people did great things. But in general, they all realized that their protest didn't work and their youthful anger was a phase, but they kept on being very liberal in a way that was counteractive, like counterproductive, not the good liberalism, but more of a corporate liberalism. And then they started to inherit these companies. My sister was a hippie. My brother was in Vietnam. My brother's 17 years older than me, and my older sister was 15 years older. And my sister was a part of a hippie group, and I think it was Tootsie Roll. The people who make Tootsie Rolls, one of her friends inherited that company and wanted nothing to do with it because they were corporate, they were these people. But some of these hippies did inherit these positions, whether they were corporate CEOs or they were liberal politicians, and they have become what they hate. They have forced us to be censored on the internet, people who disagree with them. They have pushed their agenda, right, which was the liberal agenda and all this stuff that's going on with sexual identity and the rest of this stuff, right? In the same way that they were forced to knuckle under by the powers that be, the hippies were, they're doing that to everybody else. And the Trumpers and all these people. They become what they hate, right? And in their case, it's more condemnable because they're older and they've lived their lives, right? Young people are just angry and whatever. Like there's a thing that young people go through, which is just natural for them to go through. It's what they do with it later on, keeping some of that fire alive, but also maturing and understanding the bigger picture. Boomer hippies, liberal boomer hippies, for the most part, haven't done that, right? And now they have all this wealth. They were given wealth like no other generation, and they're bankrupting the system. And they're, basically, I mean, with all the things that the boomer hippies have, all the monies they have, the Social Security is going to die with them and all these things. They're leaving the next generation completely fucked, right? The succeeding generation, especially young people. And they don't care, like the selfishness of the boomer hippies, right? And this guy, is blaming kids, young people.
Of this. But a primary one is our toxic political party wars. This is an outgrowth of empowering fringe thinking with the left and right.
Fringe thinking. See, this is it. Empowering fringe thinking.
Have been stoking for years, both of them, especially online. Get angry, get even.
Fringe thinking, right? People who don't believe in the official story. And the thing is, whether people get angry organically or is stoked by whatever he's claiming or whatever that bullshit he's saying, right? The fact of the matter is, at some point, you just have to be honest with yourself about the system. And, just because of your own well-being. And then realizing that you're contributing to that system, right? Like you're in for a pound, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, right? Like this all or nothing thing. You can't complain about a system that you yourself like parts of it. You can't just take the good parts of the system, right? You have to know every part that goes into it, all the ugly things and all the evil shit that's done to keep your lifestyle going, right? And nobody else talks about that because everyone wants to blame the elite or all this other bullshit. In reality, we're all a part of it. But the people who are controlling the system are the most a part of it, right? Because they're doing everything in their power to keep that, to keep this illusion that we're the good guys. We're the heroes. And this is a part of that, right? The CEO who's, responsible for suffering of people is somehow a tragedy.
Own them. Hard to find a podcast that isn't desperately imploring people to reject everything in society, except what they're saying, of course. Even the manifesto of this assassin.
But, they make this the problem because you're becoming obsolete because you're just some blowhard who's a gatekeeper for the system, who's grown up with privilege, and you're condemning people who are seeking some deeper levels of truth and are going beyond the official story, which is always bullshit, right?
Manifests the weakness of the assassin's own choices. He identifies problems with
So here it says, to the feds, I keep this short because I respect what you do for our country. To save a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Not even Mario. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook. If present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of the traumas, but it has to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly 42 in the life expectancy. Again, why does anybody write manifestos when the CIA loves these things? Because they always put them out there. They say he wrote a manifesto. Oh my God, he must be guilty. As soon as you write a manifesto, you're a deranged person that's trying to destroy society that all of us benefit from, right? That's how it's put out there. United is the largest company in the U.S. by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has growth and grown, but as our life expectancy. Know the reality. These indecipherable. It says something that's indecipherable. These blanks have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allied them to get away with it. Allowed them. That should be allowed. Why is this so freaking... This guy's valedictorian? Like he's, just... Again, he could be dyslexic like I am, but obviously the problem is more complex. But I do not have the space, and frankly, I do not to pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed and these people. Decades ago, the problems simply remain. It is not the issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty.
Transparency and pricing irregularities and profits over people in healthcare and health insurance. Yes.
Profits over people. That's everything. Once you're a healthcare industry that puts profits over people, then your job is about profit and not about how healthy they are. And the system's completely fucked. The system needs to be trashed and thrown away because it can't be fixed. Because you've made money more important than the people's health, right? The healthcare system has to be about keeping people healthy. You have to be a healer and not a businessman. And most of these doctors and certainly the pharmaceutical agencies and these hospitals are all business people, right? Health is secondary.
True. Too often, true. Of course, many industries do this. But healthcare matters more than just about any other industry because it can literally be life or death. The problem is real. Obama tried to address it with the ACA. It's interesting.
No, he didn't.
Trump wants to disrupt everything, right? You can get off that now. Yet, even he never goes after.
Suspects' alleged manifesto leaks online. Who leaked it? Who had access to this, right? How'd they get it? So this is something where if he put it out on social media and it was there for everyone to see, that's one thing. And again, he is like the people that are running this psychological operation. But they leak everything. Everything gets leaked. Like every detail, and it'll come over a period of days. And so they're convicting this guy. They're failing. Everything that they're doing here should create a mistrial. Anybody who's in the investigating team who leaks information that sways a jury, that should be a mistrial. This guy should get away scot-free because they leaked information that should not have been leaked. And in the court of public opinion, because some of these people who are reading these things are going to have to be a jury of his peers. And now they're prejudiced against all these things that have been said, right?
After the big insurers. We know why. They get what they want. But the idea...
Exactly. And so why are you not covering them? You say these things like just passing, and then you slam this kid with your big-ass freaking jaws bite down there.
That you change something that is bad by doing something worse. Now, you don't have to be a genius with an Ivy League pedigree to know that that is stupid. The surrender of moral high ground and the obvious lack of connection to reality is so apparent. I want to show you a clip from Piers Morgan, his podcast.
Okay, so he's saying that what he did was worse. He killed one guy. I mean, if the official story is he killed one guy, how many people did that guy kill, right? And so if that guy's never going to, if he's just going to get bonus after bonus and reward after reward, and if they ever do get sued, which they won't, they'll pay a fraction of their profits, and so they never get punished. This guy never gets punished, even though his healthcare system is, the insurance agency that works with United Health is doing damage and hurting people, right? And all these people are profiting from it, the pain and suffering of other people. And so who cares if he dies? Again, doesn't do anything, doesn't fix it. There'll be just some other asshole who will do the same job. It's not a solution. But why is what that kid why is what that kid did worse? At least it's honest. This guy, the healthcare guy, and again, I don't know what this guy's done or not done, the United Healthcare. I don't know what they're, I know it's not the best insurance, right, because we have it. And because, we just have it for like whatever, emergencies or whatever it is, right? Just because you have to have it otherwise you get, tax penalties or whatever. But, in terms of, all these things that this guy possibly could have done, and what this one action this one kid did, why is that worse, right? We know that the healthcare system has caused so much damage to so many people.
Podcast. And one of this assassin's supporters. Watch this lady.
Why would you be in such a celebratory mood about the execution of another human being?
I do believe in the sanctity of life, and I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels like...
Seriously?
I mean...
Joy?
Seriously? You piece of shit. Piers Morgan's one of the biggest pieces of shit, right? Now, when you're watching a TV show or a movie, and when the villain finally gets killed, there's at least a sense of relief, sometimes joy, right? If you're watching some fictional movie and there's a CEO who's a piece of shit asshole and that person dies. Like if Mr. Burns died on The Simpsons, other than people liking his character, how many people would be upset by that? Some evil CEO dies, right? You don't care about these people. And when you hear about people dying that you don't know, I mean, some people are compassionate, empathetic. It's hard to connect with them. I hear about things like this all the time, right? But even, when my parents died, I mean, I love my parents, but Jesus Christ, it was a relief in many ways. I wasn't joyful about it. I don't have a reaction to these things because, oftentimes, like it's just what happens. It's just what was supposed to happen, right? Tragedy is something worse, like when somebody dies and it's tragic. Something when, young people die or whatever those things are, right? Those are more painful. Like my daughter's suicide was a more painful thing than my parents, right? But in terms of an evil CEO guy dying, if that's what people see him as, well, why wouldn't they feel joy? Maybe they're wrong about this guy, but, if United Healthcare did a bunch of bad things and this guy was in charge of it, and the people who suffered because of that, of course they would feel joy. There's nothing wrong about it. There's not bad people compared to this piece of shit or Cuomo's. You guys are like way worse. Like you have no moral high ground to judge people. You guys are mainstream media pieces of shit that propagate these lies and get paid by these fucking corporations.
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again,
we're watching the footage. How can this make you joyful?
Smiling when she explains how
again, this stuff we are blaming people and not the institution that's created this, right? The institution has created these people. The internet has created these, these opinions. The truth coming out there about these evil corporations that have done evil shit time and time again.
Murder kind of, sort of makes sense when so many have been killed by this guy, Thompson. Like she was taking
why don't you investigate how many deaths are misery? What's this guy's misery footprint in terms of what his company's done under his leadership as CEO? What is this guy guilty of in terms of people suffering? Interview people who have suffered from United Healthcare depriving them of their, the health care that they need, whatever it is, right? I mean, I don't know if he's done anything. I don't care. But let's say he has. You're not looking into this guy. Find out what kind of person he was, right? And so, yeah, like it's still murder. It's a crime. If the kid did it, and if it's a real story, he's going to suffer the penalties. But let's also find out what this guy did. Did he deserve this? Well, if it happened, he did, because everything's divinely orchestrated, right? If this happened, I think it's just a joke and it's part of a show. But anything that happens is deserved. There's no mistakes. Everything that happens, there's no accidents, there's no victimization. Everything you get in life, you deserve, good, bad, and ugly. I mean, that's what I believe. Like you can, figure that out for yourself. But there's no victim consciousness and no real victimization. Everything is deserved. And, the good things you got, you deserve those for whatever reason. You got those even if you did it criminally. And then you're going to deserve the consequences you get for all the shit you pulled for doing the wrong thing or whatever it is, right? Like there's nothing that's left. Everything's accounted for. If there's a God, then everything's accounted for. That means there's a plan, right? I say this over and over again.
The position in debate class, but you see, when you actually pull the trigger and you end a life, there's nothing rhetorical about it. Brian Thompson was a CEO, not a death camp operator. Our death rate is too high. And you know what it has to do with? Our diet, as much as anything we're denied by
insurance. Okay, but then what if he killed somebody producing carcinogens in food? It's a CEO of a company that puts out carcinogens, or the head of McDonald's who puts out poison, or anything, heart disease and things like this, right? Would that be justified? See, like these people are hurting other people and profiting off of it. That's the bottom line. Murdering them, yeah, that's not the solution. But then at least they should be condemned constantly. The way you're condemning this kid, you should be condemning every one of these CEOs every day on your show, naming names and listing the crimes that they've committed. Otherwise, then shut the fuck up, right? You fucking shill.
Jurors, and yes, I think both have to change. But what just happened only makes change harder, because now those wanting change are worse than what they oppose. He just did one of the few things that is worse than denying care that may lead to early death. He guaranteed death and to make nothing better. The irony.
Okay, there's nothing better about what he did because it's not going to change anything, right? And protests don't work. But this is a person that wanted change, according to the official story. And he's articulating a real problem which you agree on. These other people are just gaslighting and covering up the problem and, doing everything in their power to pretend that they're good people, but find new and creative ways to screw other people and make money off of it. Hurt other people and make money off of it, right? Because it's for profit. And you've just admitted this is a real problem. So the real problem has nothing to do with the assassination or any of these other things or what's happening online. The real problem is with corporate greed and corruption and the whole system being a system that's demonic and an evil empire, right, that goes against the natural order of things. And we all suffer because of it, right?
Is that if genius assassins like this guy and his fans, with their perverse smile, had tested their own ideas, which of course fundamentalists never do, they would have learned that systemic change is rarely achieved by violence, certainly not one violent act. Ask the January 6th crew, or read the study by Chenoweth and Steffen, and why civil resistance.
Okay, but when people act out of suffering, and regardless of whether it changes anything, it's a real expression of suffering. It doesn't work. Yeah, sure, that's true. But the other side isn't going to change anything because they're making profits. They're making bank on other people's suffering, right? So, I mean, just stop. You silly little...
works, suggesting nonviolent campaigns are twice as likely to achieve their goals.
There's no goals going to be achieved. Money always wins. Nothing's going to change until the system comes down. You'll have one person go to jail. You have one, what happened to the opioid crisis and the Sackler family? They made a deal to give $5 billion in fines, but they made $10 billion. So they still had $5 billion in profit, which is extraordinary. And so they had to give back some of it. But, in reality, this guy's just a piece of shit because he's blaming this young kid and the angry people on the internet and how they're radicalized. But they're radicalized because we're experiencing the truth of our system. And even if people are only getting a piece of the truth, at least they're looking for some truth. Where you guys are just celebrating and indulging in the lies. You've swallowed the blue pill and you just want to believe whatever the Matrix tells you to believe because you have privileges and you have a position. And even worse than that, you're shills and you're gatekeepers to prevent the truth from coming out. You always get on the wrong side of it. Because as bad as a murder is, what is happening systemically is much worse. A singular assassination. Plus, he called the guy assassin a couple times. I missed that. I meant to point that out. But he calls the guy the assassin. He's convicted him. He's believing everything that the mainstream media and the government tells him to believe. And he's already convicted this guy. And, the rest of these people have as well. All right, there's one other thing that just came in about the breaking story. I'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so this CNN person that's named Kate, and I think it's Baldwin. My wife and I used to... Brooke Baldwin. There was a woman used to work there named Brooke Baldwin. She had a very deep voice. We had a whole Brooke Baldwin thing, but she quit. This is Kate somebody. And I just ate lunch and watched CNN report this again an hour later. So this is when the story broke. And I hope that she includes everything I just saw because it's awesome. But if I have to go back and tape it, I recorded that. So on my, for my DirecTV, so I can go back and tape it if I have to. Hopefully it's all here. But let's start here.
We are just learning fingerprint comparisons made between prints collected at the scene of the Brian Thompson murder compared with prints taken in the arrest process of Luigi Mangione show a positive match.
No way. That's just crazy. See, this is why, when you're watching a show, well, let's go to the rest of this.
2 law enforcement officials briefed on the matter have just confirmed to CNN. We're going to have more on that in just a moment. Also this hour, Mangione is still behind bars in Pennsylvania after a judge denied him bail. Before his court appearance, that was yesterday, he yelled and struggled against officers once he turned and saw that the media was standing outside the courthouse.
Everyone's got to point that out. Like he was a pussycat, as the great man Cr1me's once said. But then as soon as the cameras were on, the guy started showing he was like tough guy.
And police now say a notebook that they found on him has a so-called to-do list in it from before the killing, as well as a reported reference to deciding not to use a bomb to target the victims.
On the to-do list, he mulled using a bomb, but he didn't want to kill innocents. So this was a guy who was top of his class, right? So we're talking about a guy who taught himself how to code so he could do video games. I mean, there's stuff that I'm learning that I'm not showing you here, that everyone said he was really brilliant, and he was an engineer and somebody who, you just have to watch basic murder shows, right? And so, like I covered all the things yesterday, I'll relist those when we get through this. But he has a to-do list on him with a gun, with a silencer, with a mask he's wearing, and he's all the clothes that he had, the same clothes that he was wearing when he allegedly did the murder, right? So this guy learned nothing. Did he watch no TV mysteries, no TV murder movies, or couldn't think his way through this? He's a person who knows technology and understands the technology that they have. And he wore a mask because he knew that there was cameras, right? So why wouldn't he? Well, let's go through this thing. He didn't want to kill innocents.
So he would not, quote unquote, kill innocents. Also new this morning, disturbing video of what appears to be wanted posters popping up around New York City for other health executives. All of this as the suspect's lawyer is now speaking out about offers they say they've received to pay from outside to pay for his legal fees.
Obviously, my client appreciates the support.
Okay, so we don't want to get into the lawyer. There's this guy here.
Their right to free speech and saying that's the way they're supporting my client.
Joining us right now, CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller, CNN Law Enforcement Contributor Steve Moore, also here with me. John, this is your new reporting, and this is a big deal. This is the first positive forensic match that we know of. Walk us through what you've learned.
So, fingerprints collected at the scene of the Thompson murder from a plastic water bottle, from a discarded cell phone, the so-called burner phone, have now been compared.
Okay, so this guy, right? Now, he was wearing, as far as the picture goes, it looks like he isn't wearing gloves, which makes no sense at all, right? Because everybody knows that the fingerprints are going to be a part of this thing. So if he didn't want to get caught, like he could have just stayed there and put his laid on the ground and put his hands on the ground and just got arrested in New York and made a statement. But instead, he devised an escape plan that allowed him to go to Pennsylvania and stay there. He went to college there or wherever it was. He has ties to Pennsylvania, but he also has ties to all these other places. And why not go to San Francisco, go to Hawaii, any number of these places? But instead, he stayed one state over, and so he stayed a state over where extradition would be easy, and he left fingerprints at the scene of the crime. He left a disposable water bottle, threw away a water bottle that he touched with his fingers and without gloves on, which has fingerprints right near the scene of the crime, and also threw away a burner phone. He decided, all right, I'm here at the murder scene. Let's make sure I leave my fingerprints and possibly DNA evidence so that they can place me at the scene of the crime, which is what everybody knows is what happens. I know that because I've watched TV shows about it and I've watched things on the news. And so we know this is what they're going to look for. He's supposed to be a really smart guy. And then the stuff, like I said, he went to McDonald's wearing a mask and sat there on the internet waiting for somebody to recognize him. And he was most recognizable wearing a mask. And why is he even in a McDonald's when he's a healthcare person, right? He's on the internet there, where he could be, I don't know, in a hotel, somewhere private, laying low until this story dies down. And then they catch him with all this evidence on him, all these silly things. He's got a manifesto. He's got a to-do list on him now and how to execute this crime. So, I mean, it's just an absolute, joke, right?
Against the arrest fingerprints taken by police in Altoona of the suspect, and yesterday they were able to make a match to the prints that they collected at the scene. not a surprise in some regard, in that they had an individual allegedly with a gun and a silencer and a mask and those things, but it is the first scientific forensic match that joins the growing pile of circumstantial evidence that they can say, well, how else would it be someone if that fingerprint is here and he's there with that gun and so on. Now, there's more.
You know, so when you're watching a mystery, like a murder mystery, it's like a whodunit. And you're going through and watching it, unless you've read the book or, you know, whatever, you have some information, intel about what happened, you're trying to solve it. And they often throw in red herrings and little twists and turns. And they do a slow reveal. And this is the way they conduct these releasing of this data, right? So they get the guy and they get some weapons on him. You know, they have pictures of him they're showing you initially, him riding his bike. And then they more and more pictures come in. And they show you the different pictures. And then they get the guy. And then they leak a manifesto. And then you find out about the guy and his family. You find out about all these things to do with him. You find out about his back injury because there has to be a motive. You find out about what kind of person he is and all the other evidence that was there. And now fingerprints. Now they get some fingerprints and they tie it to this. They're leaking all this information. And it's making it impossible for you not to believe, unless you're somebody who doesn't believe in the media, which is most people, that this guy did it, right? And it's just a complete farce. It's mishandled, right? You're trying this case right in, you know, on the media instead of all this leaked information. Just silly. Now, if the guy comes out and admits he does it, you know, it's all part of a show anyway. But it's so, like, contrived. It's just not realistic.
Which is DNA evidence still pending, ballistic tests still pending. Part of that is because the gun was recovered in Pennsylvania.
So they said that he had a different style gun. When they originally said what kind of gun it was not a 3D printed gun. And I just covered that yesterday. But now they're saying it is the gun. So he kept the murder weapon on him. He kept all of the evidence. He left some evidence at the scene of the crime. And the rest of the evidence he kept on him and was sitting with it in a backpack at McDonald's, right? And so it's just silly. Now, if he wanted to be caught, that's one thing. But again, like, this doesn't look like a real type of... it looks like just some kind of TV show. Like a bad B TV show. A poorly scripted, unrealistic TV show.
Match that to be the same gun, they would have to obtain it, fire it, test it, compare the shell casings and the bullets. But this is a big deal.
It is a big deal because, you know, to this point...
It's a big deal. It's a big fucking deal, as Joe Biden once said.
That could be one of the things that you could hear from the suspect's attorney saying, you don't know if this is the guy. This wasn't me. We talked about this, right? Like, you could say this isn't me. This guy with a mask and this, whatever. But this is scientific connection, forensic connection between the two. Talk to me more about ballistics. Is it just a logistical kind of obstacle that needs to be overcome in order to get confirmation or not that the ballistics match, do you think? Or,
you know, the gun is actually the charge that they are holding him on in Pennsylvania. So that evidence needs to stay with him because, you know, they're the ones who have him in custody, and he has not waived extradition, which basically says, I'm not going to New York, where they would then turn over all that evidence to New York.
Okay, Jesus Christ. Is there anything more they have to say?
I want to get to more of that, but Steve, let me bring you in on this, just the importance of what John Miller has learned about this.
Okay, so I think it's everything that I saw in the show later on. The to-do list was the key. There might be other details. I'll go look at that. They'll just be emerging anyway. It'll be here tomorrow. I'm getting a little bit tired of covering this. I want to give my voice a break. And I have no idea how much content is here. I gotta see how much time this is. I haven't even done a voiceover or something else, other things I want to talk about. I got the View ladies talking about this. I'll wait till tomorrow to cover that because that'll be, you know, I mean, that'll be the View, you know, the stupidity of the View. Unless some other breaking thing. Well, I guess I'll be here tomorrow. This video won't go out till tomorrow, so I'll see what happens tonight, tomorrow morning. But you see how they leak different things out. Pretty soon they're going to say that the gun is a match, and that the DNA is a match, like these things, right? To where there's just all this circumstantial evidence and it's a slam dunk, and then the guy comes out and says, yeah, it was me. And so all these things, right? But what brain dead person, what criminal would have a to-do list on them of a crime they were going to commit? Like, if you're going to commit a crime, why would you have your plan in your pocket, the gun you committed the crime with in your pocket, the clothes that you were wearing when you committed the crime, leaving evidence behind at the scene of the crime? Like, only a really stupid person, or a person trying to get caught, or an actor, right, would tell, this is, it's just silly. It's just so freaking silly. Okay, so I was just about to be done with this, and YouTube recommended this video. There's one more breaking story, then I can wrap this up and start again tomorrow. This is Kyra Phillips. Remember, she has that meme where she was talking to a young Don Lemons and then said, swag is like, well, I'll see if I can see it after. Let's go through this and see if I can find that meme. But I guess she's on ABC now. She used to be on CNN. And this happened.
The NYPD commissioner now saying that the gun found on Luigi Mangione matches shell casings found at the scene where United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was murdered. The 26-year-old suspect is being held right now in a Pennsylvania jail cell, fighting.
So it says mounting evidence against Luigi Mangione in killing of United Healthcare workers CEO. Okay, so the story was he had a completely different gun that wasn't a 3D printed gun. That's what it was said yesterday. But then he had this 3D printed gun with a silencer on him in McDonald's a week after the crime, with a to-do list, with his mask. He left fingerprint evidence and maybe DNA evidence at the scene of the crime. Just all this like stupid stuff, right? Anybody who he had a extensive plan, he got away, and yet he left all this evidence behind. And so now it says that he was carrying the murder weapon with him, which is now one of these illegal 3D guns, which will go after that because that'll be a whole talking point, right? And it's just silly.
Extradition to New York. Investigators collecting clues for a possible motive, looking at Mangione's writings and fingerprints found on items near the shooting scene in Manhattan. Our Phil Lipoff joins us now with all the latest details. All right.
Phil Lipoff, what do you got the details?
What do we know about the gun, Phil?
Well, we know that the NYPD was able to get it back from Pennsylvania to the crime lab here in New York.
The crime lab.
And this is a big piece of evidence, Akira. Up until now, the evidence that had been piling up, the video, the items that were found on Mangione in Pennsylvania when he was found at that McDonald's were largely circumstantial up until today.
Now they got the murder weapon. He has the murder weapon on him. He's connected to the murder weapon. Boy, this guy's screwed.
Now they have matched fingerprints on a bottle and a phone found near the...
Next to a passport that came out of one of the buildings. They found one of the extra passports, and one of the guys who did the big event in 2001 was just floating there, too, at the scene of the crime.
Crime scene, 2 Mangione's fingerprints. And
okay, so that's it. Let me see if I can find the Kyra Phillips thing here. And then I already did the voiceover at the end of this thing because this video was already up. I rendered it, but I want to add this one more thing here. Okay, so here it is.
All right, our white cameraman is trying to swagger over there with the camera. Swagger, it's like swagger with a little more flavor.
Flavor! It's like swagger with a little more flavor. That's just great.
All right, our white cameraman is trying to swagger over there with the camera. Swagger, it's like swagger with a little more flavor. We were curious to know if President Obama has got it, just like the song says. So, of course, swagger guru TJ Holmes takes a look at it. His concern now is that we're going to be...
Okay, so that's TJ Holmes and not Don Lemons. I don't know what happened to TJ Holmes, but Kyra Phillips is on ABC now. Wait, is TJ Holmes the guy who had the affair with his co-worker on ABC? Like Good Morning America? I think it's the same guy. I'm editing, and then I'm like, hey, that name sounds familiar. But anyways, they both ended up on ABC, I guess. But that's just brutal, right? And so let's go to the last little bit of ending I already made here before. Okay, so this video is gone. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes already. And so unless some more stuff comes in tonight, I don't feel like I'm going to cover it anyway. I'll just start over tomorrow. This story is just going to completely be unfolding. It's getting so silly. I mean, The guy had a fucking to-do list. And the guy committed a crime, and 7 days later, he's out in public. His photo is everywhere wearing a mask. And so people might recognize him wearing a mask, right? And he's got all the stuff in his backpack, the murder weapon, a to-do list. He's got his manifesto somewhere. He's got all this stuff on him a week after committing this crime. It's just like he left, fingerprinted objects with his fingerprints on them at the scene of the crime. There's probably DNA evidence there as well. Probably took a leak on the... I mean, Luigi's just a silly goose, right? The whole thing is just silly. It's an insult to your intelligence. I mean, the stuff that they try to... And they get away with it. They just can say these things, and they don't call each other out. Nobody calls the official story out. And if they do, people just don't, whatever. There's just nothing to... there's no sense of shame or sense of integrity where people are like, this is bullshit. Like, this is silly. What are you guys trying to do here? Like, there's no self-esteem left in the media because they must be like, this is like completely fabricated and staged and whatever. And they just go out there and they shill for it, whatever they get for their shilling. And they all have their different takes and their point of view, but it's all within this narrow bandwidth of things you're allowed to talk about. But no one ever calls bullshit. Like Cr1me saying, yeah, this story doesn't make sense, and then immediately saying it's the kid's fault for not making sense, instead of saying, oh, this looks like it's a staged event and it's not believable, which would be the most likely, Occam's razor type of... And when you have a government that lies about everything, and they're always putting these manipulative agendas out, it would be them. They would be the people that are perpetrators of whatever the fuck we're watching here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.